Rocky Top Insider presents the RTI Rim Runner with Bob Baskerville and Ryan Shumpert.
Welcome. Time for another edition, a postseason edition of the RTI Rim Runner. Man, we got a lot to talk about today. March Madness in full effect. We're going to break it down for you. I'm Rob Baskerville, as always, joined by my co-host and RTI's finest, Ryan Shumpert. Ryan, we have arrived, man. It's best couple weeks of the year in my book. I'm ready to get to it. How are you?
I'm doing great. It is the best couple of weeks of the year. There's something even I know some people do it, and I have tremendous respect for the physical printout bracket. Maybe it's my lack of printer that I just don't own that I can't do the printout bracket.
Yeah.
But there's something about that paper in your hand or that bracket challenge that you're looking at that it feels like we've arrived. So excited for this week and. Excited to get in here and talk about everything Tennessee related and everything just with the bracket as a whole.
Yeah, yes, sir. I've already filled out one bracket. I don't know about you, but I've already gotten one done. I've got about 2 or 3 more I've got to do, though.
Yeah, I did a quick hitter one last night. Honestly, just in like preparation for today. I do think that's been a unique part of like starting to cover a team. As I watched the bracket challenge and it's just like or the bracket reveal, and I'm so narrow-sighted on Tennessee. So like when I'm seeing the 3 seeds and 11 seeds go off the board before Tennessee, I'm only thinking about it in terms of, all right, Tennessee's not going to play Michigan State. They're not going to get so-and-so in this game. That it's like I a couple hours later go look at the bracket, go through it for the first time. It almost feels like I'm seeing it for the first time in a more macro view just of the sport. So I had to do that at least once last night before getting on here and talking about it.
Yeah, I agree. I think I give a tip of the hat to the selection show. They actually, in the past, I was like, okay, so they go on at 6, probably 6:30 is when we'll start to see the reveals and everything. I mean, they went right to it, which I thought was great. That was, no more suspense. Let's just cut to the chase. So that was good.
That was good. I know we had a couple, and it's been a couple years back now, but that stretch where they were revealing all 68 teams that made it in alphabetical order before giving the bracket, and it takes the suspense away. I think too, even for the bubble teams, of being like, all right, this is the last 11 seed. Who's getting the last 11 or sometimes 12? But no, it was good and straight to the point, and overall well done.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, the field has been set, and we are literally just a day or so away from first 4 action beginning for the 2026 NCAA tournament. And that's what we're going to talk about today, what the road ahead looks like specifically for the Vols now that they have their seed and first round assignment. But we'll also discuss what it looks like for the other 9 SEC teams besides Tennessee that made the field of 68. And for that, we'll get help from our friend at Southeastern 16, Blake Lovell. And then Ryan and I will also widen the lens and make our predictions on who we believe will be advancing to Indianapolis in April for the Final Four. And speaking for myself, a little spoiler alert, I'm now not seeing it as an all-chalk Final Four. So more to come on that, and I'm sure Ryan's got some interesting thoughts on it as well. But before all of that, I want to remind you to like and subscribe our show if you're checking us out on the RTI YouTube channel. Or if you're listening to us as a podcast, make sure you download us and make us part of your podcast rotation. We're available wherever you listen to your podcasts. We appreciate the support. Always love the fact that we have people who are interested in college basketball as much as us. So really make sure you make us part of that rotation. You might already, but if you don't, make sure you like and subscribe or download the podcast. So the opening tip, we're going to spend just a couple minutes, not much, on the SEC tournament and what it meant for Tennessee basketball. The Vols played their last 2 games before the NCAA tournament, and it was kind of a series of games that was typical for 2025, 2026 Tennessee basketball. A struggle here, an electric rally there, and then they revert to some good old-fashioned ineptitude on their way to a 1-1 week in Nashville. Ryan, The first opponent in the SEC tournament, desperate Auburn squad. They were literally playing for their postseason life. They were 17-15 coming in. If they win that game against Tennessee, by all accounts, it sounds like they would have made the field of 68. And so pretty much a must-win game for the Tigers. Early in the game, too, Auburn looked like the better team, jumping out to a 7-point halftime lead, and they even extended it to 10 in the second half. But, man, then the Tide turned in a big, big way.
Yeah, it did. A 20-0 run. This has been a Tennessee team that, even though it's had some comeback wins and it's certainly had its fair share of blown leads in the second half, it really hasn't been from big runs either way. It's been kind of in the Evan Miyakawa kill shot chart is kind of the team that I think they've pretty consistently this year been in the group of games aren't decided on big runs. So it was funny to see, just a behemoth run really. And, I think you saw some of Auburn's flaws. I think they started breaking down as a team during that stretch too and losing their cool and stuff like that. But it was good for Tennessee to rally. It was good to see Nate Ament play as well as he did in his first game back from injury. And certainly, I think, if anything, these two games that Tennessee played in Nashville, on top of how Tennessee had played in the 2.5 games prior without Nate Ament, it shows just how badly Tennessee needs him and just how badly Tennessee needs him to play well.
Yeah, agreed. It felt like Tennessee, they started to, I don't think they shut him down entirely, but they started to neutralize Todd Pettiford because he was out of his mind in the first half. But I kept feeling if they could slow him down, Auburn, he wasn't getting much help otherwise. And sure enough, the way the game played out, Auburn, the rest of the lineup besides Pettiford, who finished with 28, I think they shot 12 of 42, not good. So it was good to see. The one last thing I would say that I want to put a footnote to was we don't win that game without Nate Ament, of course, and Jacoby had a pretty serviceable game as well. But during that 20-0 blitz, Felix Okpara had 2 blocks that for me were as important as any basket we scored. And the second one, in my opinion, was a full-on, that swung the momentum entirely our way. It was pretty incredible.
Yeah, the block on the alley-oop attempt from Pettiford to Elijah Freeman was pretty remarkable. I mean, just one of the more remarkable plays that I've seen in a while. Tennessee assistant director of player development Riley Collins told me in the open locker room after the game that it was the best block he'd ever seen in person. And you watched the replay Pettiford's, like I said, at half court and Felix is at the top of the 3-point line, top of the key 3-point line when that pass is released, and to go block it. And during that run, the pro Tennessee crowd was getting loud, but it certainly went to a different level on that play. Yeah. And then I think Nate grabbed the rebound and then got it to Jacoby, who went to the bucket and I believe tied the game right there.
Yeah, that was it.
So I would concur that was the biggest play of the stretch.
Yeah, no doubt. So Tennessee gets the satisfaction of, they get a win, but then they also likely kind of close the door on Auburn's kind of gross, barnstorming approach to trying to get into the tournament with all their social media posts and everything else. But that put them at 17-16, effectively ended their run for the postseason. Tennessee, though, meanwhile, moves on. They try to exact revenge against a Vanderbilt team who had just handled Tennessee in Knoxville less than a week prior to the third game, actually. And it was an ugly one, man. Vols were in it, but then there was that run that Vandy made in the second half, and it just felt like two things. It felt like, A, the game was over. B, their strategy was clear defensively. It looks exactly like what they did in Nashville, and that was swarm and rough up Nate Ament, and I'd say mission accomplished on that front.
Yeah, no doubt. Nate did what he's been able to do in a lot of games when he hasn't shot well and still been, just raised his floor by being able to get to the free throw line. I mean, he still records a double-double, but you see Tennessee needs Nate to make shots. That's just the reality of the situation. And I think it's it's still an oversimplification, but especially when Nate hits threes, I just feel like that opens up things for him so much. And how teams have to get out a little bit further to guard him. And it does feel like he's been very boom or bust. I have to go back and look. But I feel like there hasn't been many games Nate's made 1 3 this year. feels like he's going to go over. He's going to make 2 or 3. So,
Yeah.
Again, you see how important he is, and it was a lot of the issues Tennessee's had all year. I did think a big positive from that game, Jacoby Gillespie kind of found his shot. He had been in a big time shooting slump before that, so that's important and is good for him to see a couple go down before the NCAA tournament. But yeah, as a whole, a lot of the same issues we've seen from Tennessee throughout their losses this season.
Yeah, and they just couldn't stop the Vandy guards. I mean, Duke Miles, and again, by the way, common thread in Tennessee's 11 losses, a number 1 guard for the opponent has averaged about almost 25 points a game. I mean, that's just tough to overcome. But Miles had at least at Vandy, a career high 30 points. Tyler Tanner, 19. And this is not precise, but as I understood it, Miles and Tanner either scored or assisted on like 60 plus points out of Vandy's 75. I mean, just dominance in the backcourt.
Yeah, it was throughout the game. Vanderbilt did not get much from their front court. Okereke, I think, shot like 1 of 9 or 1 of 10. And kind of ironic because they beat Florida the next day because McLaughlin and Okereke and Jalen Washington, I think, hit like 7 of 10 3-point attempts or something like that. So, that was an issue. And look, I think it's twofold here in the fact that the game was called very differently in the second half, called a lot tighter. And again, I think that's twofold. One, from the standpoint of Tennessee's got to do a better job of adjusting defensively, win the game. I mean, there were a couple of calls that just simply weren't fouls, but other calls that maybe they would have not been called in the first half and were in the second half. Like, you got to adjust. They were calling it tighter. And it went both ways. I thought, Tennessee got on a couple of those Nate drives, got some favorable calls. And just as a whole, you look at it, Tennessee does not shoot well from the free throw line. Vanderbilt shoots really well from the free throw line. And I think both teams shot the same amount of free throws. Vanderbilt made 6 more, so not quite the 7-point difference of the game, but not hard to see how that was a huge impact, and not surprising either, given Tennessee's struggles there this season.
Yeah, no doubt. So the Vols, their record now is 22-11, and on Sunday evening they learned of their NCAA tournament fate when they were assigned a 6 seed by the selection committee. Not too surprising. Sent to the Midwest Regional and set to face the winner of the 11 seed play-in game between Miami of Ohio and SMU in the first round in Philadelphia. If the Vols win, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but they'd play the winner of 3 seed Virginia and 14 seed Wright State. Assume that would be Virginia. On that one, Ryan, as we prepare for those games in Philadelphia, who would you rather play between Miami and SMU at this point?
Yeah, I have a story up on the site now talking about kind of the pros and cons of both. And I do think there are pros and cons of both. I think the thing that gets really interesting is my natural reaction is to say Miami of Ohio. I don't think they're that great. I think it's 6 teams in KenPom who, got automatic bids by winning their conference tournament. Mid-major teams are higher on KenPom than Miami, Ohio is.
Yeah.
Including, I think, McNeese, who Vanderbilt got, Hofstra, who Alabama's facing in the first round. So that's kind of where I naturally land on it. But it's an interesting dynamic because for Miami of Ohio to win, to play Tennessee, then all of a sudden they do have a Power 5 win. And you're seeing them have success against these more athletic teams, and maybe they're better than Tennessee thought. At the same, in the same, not wanting to see Miami, Ohio, Philadelphia, not going to be a large Tennessee contingent there, won't be a large SMU contingent. That'll feel like a true neutral site. Tennessee plays Miami, Ohio, any neutral observer in the Wells Fargo Arena is going to be going for Miami, Ohio. So it's going to make more of a road game for Tennessee. So, and then, SMU's struggling too. They've lost 5 out of 6. Does seem like they're going to get BJ Edwards back, who's been out the last 5 games for them and certainly has not helped. So I see pros and cons of both. Overall, I think it was a pretty good first-round draw. I think SMU's in Miami, Ohio, are maybe the 2 worst at large bids in the tournament. So you can make an argument for wanting to see either one, but I certainly think Tennessee can't complain about the draw.
I don't think so either. Honestly, I'm thankful in looking at that bracket. I'm thankful that Santa Clara got a 10 seed. I do not think I would want to have played them as an 11 seed. I think they've got enough to beat Kentucky in the first round. I really believe that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I had, it's my journalist perspective here. I'm biased differently. I was already fully ready. Had texted with Tennessee SID Alex Schwartz to do Herb Sendek, Justin Gainey feature, because Herb Sendek, Santa Clara's coach, is who Justin Gainey played for in college in North Carolina State, and then was on his staff right when he got to Santa Clara for a couple years. So I kind of, part of me wanted to see it. That would have been a fun story to do. But yeah, no, I agree that would have been, a tough matchup. And certainly I think Santa Clara is better than both Miami, Ohio, and SMU.
Yeah, agreed. Well, let's widen the lens a little bit because, and we'll focus to begin with on the rest of the SEC. So, just to remind everyone, in the 2025 tournament, the SEC had 14 teams in the tournament. They had 7 teams in the Sweet 16. They had 4 teams make it to the Elite 8, 2 teams make it to the Final Four, and then, of course, the eventual national champion in Florida. And the SEC may not be as tournament ready this year as last year. I don't think they are, based on what I've seen in our conference and then what's going on in the other conferences. I don't know, Ryan, if you saw any of that Iowa State-Arizona game the other night, the semifinals of the Big 12. I was watching that and I was like, man, there is a big delta between those top teams and the SEC's top teams, maybe short of Florida. But I think that's a hot topic to discuss because there are still 10 SEC teams that are in the field this season. And I thought it would be good to extend that conversation on how much noise the SEC teams this year can really make in the upcoming tournament now that we've seen the pairings. We're going to get a little help on that. We're joined by a friend of the show and what I feel is an elite mind when it comes to SEC hoops. Let's say hello to Blake Lovell from Southeastern 16. Blake, man, thank you for joining us. As always, good talking to you again. How are you?
Doing well, guys. Yeah, good to talk to you as always.
So we've been talking a little bit about Tennessee. We'll maybe start there, and then we can, again, look around the rest of the SEC. And I think this applies to the SEC tournament. You and I were exchanging notes because we were trying to get the stars to align and maybe have you on last week leading into the SEC tournament. But schedules being what they were, it just didn't work out. And we were all of the mind that, it's probably just as well because Florida, it's going to be a coronation ceremony for Florida anyway. Now Vanderbilt said, not so fast, man. They not only beat Florida, they laid them out. And, that I guess maybe we'll start there. I said we'll start with Tennessee, but your first thoughts, any takeaways that you had from the SEC tournament in Nashville besides what we just said, that Florida didn't win it?
Yeah, I mean, clearly I think you had to be pretty impressed with both Arkansas and Vanderbilt. I mean, I thought, I tweeted out yesterday, that first half in that game was one of the best halves I think I've ever seen in the SEC tournament, when you just saw the combination of what Arkansas and Vanderbilt were doing, and just the playmaking ability, exchanging, just blow by blow, like every possession. And so, I mean, again, there's a reason they played in the championship, and I thought they were just both very, very good in this tournament. And I think if you look at it even from an Arkansas standpoint, you kind of already knew what you had with Darius Acuff and just kind of the supporting cast. But I think if you're Vanderbilt too, you're probably coming out of it saying, we went 8 minutes without a field goal. We went 4 minutes without scoring in the second half, and it was still a 3-point game with 4 minutes to go. And so I think that those are definitely two teams that have to feel pretty good about where they're at. I think for Florida, I don't think it's the worst thing to just get one of those games out of the way. But do I think Florida has some things that are starting to become maybe a trend? Maybe. But we're going to see as they get into this. I didn't think Florida got a bad draw at all. So I don't know how much they'll get tested with a few of those issues, but nonetheless, I mean, I think that's kind of your biggest takeaways for me were those 3 teams outside of an Ole Miss, who certainly isn't even in the tournament. So,
yeah, I thought Vanderbilt maybe had the most impressive week, just from, obviously they don't win it, but the Tennessee and Florida games. How much did what the Doors did in Nashville change your outlook on what they can do in the NCAA tournament?
Well, it certainly didn't change the committee's outlook because they got completely hosed. And I mean, there's no other way to put it. Tennessee fans will not be upset with that, I'm sure. But yeah, Vanderbilt just got hosed in terms of the seeding. I don't think there's any reason why you could put. I mean, I was pulling on every possible metric you could, and there's just not really anything that justifies the 5 seed. Again, I said yesterday as we were doing our reaction live, I'm like, to me, there's way closer to a 3 seed than they are a 5 seed. But they kind of got stuck there, and that's where wins over Tennessee and Florida just didn't do anything for them when it came to, I think, the overall picture for them. But now that you kind of see their path, I think you can kind of look at it from a seeding perspective and say they shouldn't have been a 5. But you can also look at it and say, well, despite that, the committee gave them a somewhat, favorable path, I guess, if you want to call it. Favorable may be too strong, but McNeese is a tough team to start with. And I think anytime you have these potential upsets in the first round, for me, it always starts with a unique style. I mean, McNeese turns people over more than any team in the country. And so I think that's like, okay, you've got an extreme there, but yet, is there anybody you'd rather have with the ball in their hands as a guard duo other than Tyler Tanner and Duke Miles? There's not many other ones out there like that. So I think that's something for Vanderbilt. If you can get by that first game, which I do think will be a little bit tricky, doesn't seem like a lot of people agree with me, but I think it's kind of a tough matchup. I mean, Nebraska and Troy, I'm not sold on Nebraska, guys. I'm not buying it. So I think getting to that rematch with Florida feels like a pretty high probability. And again, if you're looking at it from Vanderbilt's perspective, what more could you ask for? You just completely dominated this team. And so I think if you're looking at it there, maybe it's not the worst thing. You kind of wound up where you were. But yeah, I think you certainly have to feel pretty optimistic about them moving forward just based on how they played this past week.
We were talking before you joined us of Tennessee's path. Still a little unknown. They'll play the winner of that game against SMU in Miami. One thing that we didn't mention, Ryan, is I think this is an advantage for Tennessee is whoever wins that game, they're going to have, how it goes with these first 4 games. They're going to have very little time to get into Philadelphia and get ready for the matchup, et cetera. I think that's a bonus for Tennessee. So I like Tennessee's position, but I'd love to get your perspective from someone who's not as close to the program, but you watch Tennessee enough because you cover it all for Southeastern 16, Blake. Does this team have a chance to get past the first weekend? I mean, that's really they've been so up and down this season. What's your point of view on it?
I like Tennessee's draw, and I know I hesitate to say that, knowing that the offensive issues have been there, and yet again, it is a game of matchups. And to me, when I look at kind of this, you do have the reset after the SEC tournament, and when I look at kind of the way it sets up for them, well, I mean, my audience will tell you I'm not the biggest SMU guy. I look at this team and I am just not completely sold. Now, with BJ Edwards, that could be different. I mean, that obviously played a role in some of their struggles down the stretch. But at the same time, I think this is a very up and down type team. And once they get him back in the lineup, yes, they will probably play better. But I'm just not convinced that this is a team that matches up that well with Tennessee. I know they can score the ball and all that, but guys, I think Tennessee will grab 25 offensive rebounds in a game like this and feel like that's really an advantage they're going to have. And defensively, I think they could be able to shut down SMU in many different areas if they play defense the way they have for the most part this season. Miami, again, I have nothing against Miami either. I'm perfectly fine with them getting in over an Auburn or an Oklahoma or anything like that, because I think you should reward wins at a certain point and not just metrics and strength of schedule and all this other stuff. But that's also the same point in that Miami just hasn't seen a team that's going to defend them like Tennessee. And I think that's where it's going to be fascinating to see how this game plays out between those two, because we always see it, right? One of these teams can just completely get hot, all of a sudden a newfound confidence and all that after game 1. You go into game 2, and here we go. I think the more dangerous team on paper looks like it's Miami because of their scoring. And if Tennessee gets a drought, then all of a sudden, like Miami hits shots, you're in trouble. But I almost wonder, is it SMU? Because if you get a team that gets one of its better players back in the lineup and all of a sudden it comes out and beats Miami by 15 or something like that, then it's like, okay, maybe they've regained some of that confidence and like, all right, well, we got this guy back. Now we can do this. Now we can do that. That's one that could be tricky too. So I say all that to tell you I still like it, though. And I would like the second-round matchup against Virginia, most likely. I don't really see Wright State giving Virginia much of an issue, but it's another team that, and I have to always say this, I'm like, there are some people out there. We have to pay attention here. This is not the same Virginia that you were used to with Tony Bennett, okay? It is a different style. It's a team that's going to play different. But, again, this is a game of matchups, and I think the way that Tennessee would match up with Virginia feels like it's a pretty decent draw. So, can they get to the Final Four? That's going to be tough. But can they make it out of the first weekend based on their draw? I think if you're Tennessee and you look around at some of those other kind of 3-14, 6-11 pods out there, I think you have to feel pretty good about where you're at.
Yeah, I think the one, and it goes vice versa with SMU and Virginia. The one thing I worry about with SMU for Tennessee just goes back to your point, Bob, and the amount of guards that have gone off against Tennessee. I mean, Boopie Miller would be the best possible player Tennessee could play this first weekend. And with BJ Edwards back, SMU has multiple guards in Tennessee would have to worry with. And, I mean, even you go back to the very beginning of the season in Vegas, that was something Tennessee had dealt with. But, on the vice versa, I think that's part of what makes that Virginia matchup not awful for Tennessee either. Is there's not one player that you look at and you say Tennessee's got no matchup for him. Tennessee doesn't have any hopes of guarding him. I think it's, Virginia, I think so much of their success has been predicated on being able to offensive rebound, and certainly you feel solid at least about what Tennessee can do to keep him off the glass.
Yeah. I mean, and I think too, guys, like it is to me one where, a lot of this attention is going to be on Tennessee offensively, but I think that's where, especially in that first game, I don't see either one of these teams putting up much of a resistance for Tennessee. And I think that's what, like, context is important here. Tennessee's struggling offensively against SEC teams that are built the way that SEC teams are built, with, front courts that have a lot of size, a lot of length, athleticism, all these things. And I think about Tennessee's going to get better shots, probably going to get easier shots in either one of these matchups. And that's where, too, like you said, I think, Ryan, just with the matchup that it would set up with Virginia, maybe I'm too optimistic here, but I do look at Tennessee, and I know there's been frustration that has sort of lingered not just with this season, but there are things that have carried over in the Rick Barnes era. We all know what that looks like, but I still think you have to put it in the context of who you're playing, and matchup-wise, I think this is probably, on paper to me, probably one of the better draws that Tennessee could have gotten, just based on looking at the other regions and kind of seeing how those set up in the other ones. So,
keeping it in the bottom part of that particular bracket in the Midwest, we talked about this a little bit as you were getting ready to join us as well, and I want to get your take. It's another SEC team, and it's, of course, one of our arch nemesis is Kentucky. And Kentucky, in my opinion, gets a very tough draw in a 7-10 matchup against Santa Clara. I was saying to Ryan, I was worried that Santa Clara may end up as an 11 and we would somehow draw them. And I just felt like that would be a nightmare for Tennessee. I think Santa Clara is really, really good. I've had some friends already reach out to me last night saying, oh my God, another Tennessee-Kentucky Sweet 16 possibility. And it's like, well, first of all, I wouldn't guarantee Tennessee is going to be in the Sweet 16, but also, even if Kentucky can beat Santa Clara, then they likely have to play Iowa State, which I think is a handful too. I just think Kentucky's got a tough road in front of them right now.
Yeah, I mean, Kentucky's biggest issue, I think, when you look at them this season, I mean, their offense is just, it's not great. And they're too unpredictable, I think, offensively at times. And that's a lot of that's based on the fact they just turn the ball over too much. Where did they finish? I think in the SEC they were 11th in 2-point percentage. They're one of the worst free throw shooting teams in the SEC. They leave a lot of points on the table, and I think that's where with Kentucky, can they do the little things well? And I think that's the thing that frustrates Kentucky fans to no end, because if they could do that this season, we'd be talking about Kentucky as a top 4 seed, but they haven't. And I think when you play a team like this, when it comes down to Santa Clara and just seeing what they can do in terms of their offensive numbers. And it's not just that they get good shots, they take good shots, but they also force turnovers. And I think that's the problem too. Again, for Kentucky in a matchup like this, I think this is a tough one too, Bob. Like, I'm not going to disagree. I think this is one where with Kentucky, if it's not just the name Kentucky, I don't know why people are kind of all in on this idea that all of a sudden this is a good draw for Kentucky. And man, Santa Clara is just a team in the WCC and all that. But I mean, I think it's kind of one where no matter whether Kentucky advances or not, I just mentioned what Santa Clara could do to them defensively, and I'll pull the number up here real quick on Iowa State, but I'm like, if Santa Clara gives Kentucky issues in terms of forcing turnovers, how does anyone sort of look at this matchup with a potential Iowa State and think that's going to be any better? It's going to be an even tougher matchup from a defensive perspective. So the fact that this Kentucky team has not just been what you would probably expect a Mark Pope team to be offensively, I think that's probably their biggest issue heading into this tournament, because they've got two teams that I think are really going to challenge them from a defensive standpoint.
Yeah, Iowa State fourth in defensive turnover rate, to your point. All right, if I set the over-under at 3.5, how many you take the over-under on SEC teams making the second weekend?
3.5. I'll take the over because I think, and I think that's where, and of course, the committee didn't give us any favors here by just leaving the SEC out of the East region. So it would have been nice to get a team there. But, I do think if Vanderbilt gets past McNeese, I'm thinking Florida Vanderbilt. So there's two right there in a potential Sweet 16 matchup. I do really like the setup for Alabama. That's probably the other team that I feel pretty good about based on, you kind of look at their path. And, I mean, in all honesty, even for Alabama, beyond the Sweet 16, I mean, I think Alabama's the kind of team that could give Michigan some issues just based on the streaky nature sometimes of Alabama. And Michigan also, again, sometimes recently, I think be a little inconsistent. They've got injury issues and all that, which Alabama may have their own issues. But we'll see kind of how it goes there. So I would probably say, hey, I feel pretty good about those three. I think Arkansas, Wisconsin, I don't think it's the best draw for Arkansas. Again, thank you, committee, for rewarding us for the SEC Tournament Championship. Now we're going to go play Thursday, and then we're going to probably, of course, many, many miles away. And then we're probably going to play a Wisconsin team that, I mean, my goodness, they've been really good, and they can be feast or famine, with the three and all that. And we've seen them lose to bad teams, but we've seen them beat a lot of good teams too, which reminds me of a team like Alabama. So I think with Arkansas having to go there, that's a tough second round matchup. So I'm not completely all in on that idea. But if you take Florida, maybe Vanderbilt, Alabama, and then again, I don't feel bad about Tennessee's chances. I would probably have that group leading the way. I think some of these other teams we mentioned, like a Kentucky, I mean, Georgia, I think Georgia's going to be okay in round one. I do not love the second round matchup. And then, of course, teams like A&M and Missouri, I just think have a tough path. So.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. The 2 10 seeds from the SEC, A&M and Missouri. Missouri draws Miami, Florida, A&M against St. Mary's. There's part of me that thinks St. Mary's, they're always well coached, good team, but they haven't really maybe experienced buckyball the way they play. I mean, which 10 seed do you see has the best chance of at least advancing past their first game?
Yeah, it's tough because I honestly think it's probably Missouri, because I think there's such a contrast here with St. Mary's and A&M. And the thing is, like, it's not St. Mary's like they usually are. They're actually playing a bit faster than they usually do. And so I think it's kind of one where this game may be a little more up-tempo than people expect, but they shoot it a lot better this year, St. Mary's does, than they did last year. I think it's, can they keep some of their big guys on the floor, because the way Texas A&M is going to run the floor and the ability to maybe get you in foul trouble and all those things. And I think that, the defensive issues for A&M are what really worries me a little bit in a game like that. Do I think both teams can get up down the floor? Yes. Because, again, I think St. Mary's will push it a little bit more to get some better shots. But I don't know. A&M's been so hard to figure out towards the end, and I feel like they're the kind of team that if St. Mary's works what they do, again, they're still going to be a lower possession type game, even if they push the tempo a little bit more. I don't love that setup for Texas A&M. I think, meanwhile, for Missouri, the ACC I have a really hard time with because I'm like, okay, you can see some good things about how the ACC took a step forward this year, but I also think it's fair to question some of these teams, and I've already done it with SMU. Again, I think even with Miami, you know, they're the kind of team too, I think defensively that will give Missouri some really good looks. And that's where, if Missouri can come out, hit some shots early, get someone like a Jacob Cruz going, I think that they could be able to beat them from the perimeter. But these are, again, 7-10 games for a reason, right? They feel pretty close together. But I actually feel like Missouri's got a little bit better of a path than Texas A&M, and maybe I'm proven wrong about that, where A&M just runs the floor, gets St. Mary's in foul trouble, especially the bigs, and that would probably be the difference. But I can't say I completely love the matchup on paper for the Aggies.
Missouri as a 10 seed getting St. Louis too is also just crazy.
Right. Yes.
I didn't catch that.
Yeah, but between that and we mentioned the Arkansas thing, but if you're a 4 seed, if you're projected to be a 4 seed, don't win the SEC tournament because they're sending you out to the West Coast to play on Thursday.
Don't ever play in the SEC tournament final. That is what the committee is telling us. Don't ever try to play for a conference tournament championship because every single year I feel like these teams that get put in this position always get some weird sort of scheduling quirk or, again, underseeded, whatever it is. Like, I feel like it happens, guys, at least every year. There's got to be at least one. So
it's a surprise. I mean, Purdue takes down Michigan in the Big Ten championship game, and I think that's what propelled them to a 2 seed. Now they go west, but still, I felt like they got some level of reward. They were probably going to be a top 3 seed otherwise.
Yeah.
I don't know why, and that's where I do think the SEC eventually. And I don't know what it eventually looks like. I do think eventually they will move up the championship game. But, it won't be anytime soon. But I do think eventually it has to happen if we keep going this direction because there's just been too many times where we're just not seeing anything from the weekend really carry much weight at all. And why would you keep putting yourself in that position as a conference when we've just seen that time and time again? So
when you said, Ryan, one quick question I have to dovetail to, you mentioned St. Louis and it got me thinking, and you mentioned Georgia. So you're not necessarily buying the St. Louis mojo, SLU mojo. You're saying Georgia's got enough to take them down in the first round?
I mean, I think, and I hesitate to say this, okay? This is actually one of the matchups I like the most, which scares me the most because I'm just like, I really like Georgia in this matchup. And I think, again, we've seen Georgia. They had a pace 3-point shooting wise that I don't know where it came from. They were just on a heater there for a little bit. And then it slipped back against Ole Miss in the tournament, which, again, kind of put them in a tough spot. But I think Georgia is going to be able to get some good shots here against St. Louis, and I think that's where, look at the way St. Louis is playing. They have been so inconsistent down the stretch. They're a team with a great record, but this isn't the team that built, such a great start, and they were kind of just dismantling teams with their efficiency and all that. They've been very inconsistent these past several weeks, and not to say that Georgia has not had their run of inconsistency as well this season, but I think it's kind of one of those where, when you look at, I think, what Georgia does well, I mean, to me, like, their offensive upgrades this season were somewhat surprising, right? You think about the guys they had on the roster last year, Asa Newell, Silas Demery, all those guys. And it's like they've become such a more prolific offensive team because they're a little bit more balanced. And can they play defense well enough to win this game? I don't know, because that's a fair question. But yet, I still think Georgia's going to get a lot of good shots here, and if they can knock down shots the way they have consistently over the past month or so, I actually think this sets up pretty well for them, and some of that is the fact that I think we have reasons to trust St. Louis a bit more than we did, probably a month ago also.
Yeah, they're like SMU, limping in a little bit. And if anyone deserves a good draw in an 8-9 game, it's Georgia after last year they got Gonzaga.
Right.
All right, last thing I got for you, Blake, and I won't hold you to it because it's just Monday, it's just early. But what's the Final Four pick?
So, I think I'm still gonna somehow. Arizona to me is probably the only one I think that just feels like a lock, and I find it hard to see a lot of resistance for them, just because of how well they've been playing. So I'm going to put Arizona there. I tried to pick someone other than Michigan in the Midwest, but I'm just like, again, it's all about the draw. And I think Alabama would probably give Michigan the toughest game. When you just look at how Alabama plays, I don't know how I'd feel about Iowa State, or Virginia or even a Tennessee. I just don't know that I'd love the matchup. So I'm going to take the 2-1 seeds there. The other side of the bracket, guys, I don't know what to do with it, because I think as of right now, I probably would put Houston in over Florida, just because I think, again, it's about the path. And when you look at Houston, I don't trust Illinois. Some people seem to be all in on Illinois. I don't trust them. So I would probably go with Houston based on the path. And then, guys, in the East, I mean, it's like, where I did a bracket yesterday. We just had fun, and I'm like, somehow I got to Michigan State, and I was like, I don't even know how I got here. Like, how did I get Michigan State to the Final Four? I have no clue, because it just kind of puts you in a blender in the East. So I'll stick with that, because I don't trust Duke. I don't trust UConn necessarily right now. And I know that sounds wild, but I think, too, it's about the path. And I think Duke's 8-9 matchup, whether it's Ohio State or TCU, I think that's a tough second-round game, the toughest for any one seed in this tournament, to me, in the second round. And then I think UConn could have their hands full, with a UCLA potentially in the second round. And so to me, that when I start doing the Final Four, I'm just like, I have to look at path more than anything else. And so I think Michigan State is not a bad choice, all things considered, when you just look at the potential upsets and you're trying to weigh all that stuff. So I'm going to go Michigan State, Houston, and then Michigan and Arizona. And I would probably, in the championship, I'd probably go Arizona versus Houston, with Arizona winning it all. So
It's funny you mentioned, we're all geniuses right now at this moment when we're doing our brackets, but I've done one already, and I've got UCLA beating UConn in the second round. I believe it. I think UCLA showed a lot when they beat Michigan State. They just ran out of gas against Purdue the other day, but as much of a goofball as Mick Cronin is, he does a pretty good job with those guys.
I'll read you a text, Bob, I got from my colleague Max Barr earlier this morning. He was on a flight back from Nashville, and he sent me a message. He goes, quote, I've tinkered myself into UCLA Final Four. This bracket is going to end me. So Max is all in on UCLA in the Final Four. So he's not the only one that's just going in on the Bruins right now. So
last question.
I was just going to say on that point, Bob, I for one, that because UCLA, UConn's also in Philly, and when Tennessee got put in Philly, I was ecstatic that we're going to, media standpoint, get to see the Dan Hurley, Mick Cronin experience in person this weekend.
God, that is true. I didn't even think about the coaching matchup, the characters there. The last thing I've got's got nothing to do with the tournament. I just want to get your take, Blake, on so Lamont Paris and Porter Moser get votes of confidence that they're going to be coming back. My question to you is, I actually think they're both pretty good coaches, to be honest with you, but is it really a reflection? Do you think the athletic directors are seeing, hey, we got pretty good coaches here, this is going to be tough to replace? Or is it, we're just not going to put that much money into basketball? Particularly that feels like the case at Oklahoma. I know they said they're going to up the ante on NIL and everything else. I'm not sure I buy it, but what are your thoughts on that with both of them coming back?
Yeah, I think this is where we're at this point, where it comes, because of how much the financial situation has changed, you're no longer just looking at, okay, how much are we paying a guy to buy out the contract, which Lamont Paris is very steep based on the fact that they gave him that extension after the good season a couple years ago.
Right.
So I'm like, there's no way they're going to put that money into it and then go hire another coach for probably more money and then have to pay for an entirely different roster. Like at South Carolina, are they going to commit all that to basketball? No. It's just not going to happen. And so I think when you look at it now and you're seeing how that's happening, at Oklahoma, I said probably talking to you guys at whatever point this season, and I've said this to many other people, I'm just like, I thought that could be a situation, depending on how the season ended, of both parties being like, this is maybe more of a fit thing, and we just don't know if it's a great fit for either one, because I was hearing stuff like that 2 years ago. And you just think about the roller coaster for Oklahoma basketball over the past couple of years. Win 13 in a row to start last season, lose 9 in a row this season. It's just they've had so many streaky type stretches throughout the regular season. But the fact that they finished the season this year as well as they did, that was simply and this is where I think you're going to see this happen a lot. Okay, we're sitting back, we're seeing how our team finished the season with this coach. Was it good enough? Did it exceed expectations in terms of where we thought we would be? If it's anywhere close, then okay, let's go out, let's make the statement that we're going to put more money into this thing, and let's just go see if we can up the dollar figure and try to compete and get a little bit further. Because if Oklahoma made the tournament next season, do I think they would really care if they were a 7 seed or a 10 seed? Is there that much of a difference? Probably not. We just made the tournament, right? And we're going to be willing to commit whatever money we need to stay in that range because, you can see what the fall off looks like. And that's where, think about going into this season. LSU and South Carolina both said, hey, we were the only 2 teams that make the tournament last year. What are we going to do? We're going to commit more money. That didn't really happen in South Carolina, and it didn't really happen at LSU. So there's the question. Is it going to happen in Oklahoma? I don't know, but when you've got, the Kentucky figure that's gets thrown around and all that, and that just keeps raising that number and seeing, do we really feel like financially we're going to go out and not only pay for a roster that can come anywhere close to a number like that, but do we also have the figures we need to get rid of this coach, get a new coach, and basically your prices, just increase so much just by making that one decision that is no guarantee that it's going to get you where you need to go. So
yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. It's just, again, I feel like we're seeing some definite stratification with some of these programs between like football and basketball is really what it's about. So
yep, for sure.
It's going to be interesting. Blake, we really appreciate the time. You've been really gracious with your time. We've gone for a while here, but this was fun talking through it all. Let everybody know where they can check out your work at Southeastern 16, because I'm guessing with as many SEC teams in the field of 68, you're going to be pretty busy later this week.
Yeah, we will, guys. Yeah, find us at Southeastern 16 on YouTube. Of course, we'll have game previews up for every first-round SEC game. We're expanding our coverage this year, so we'll also have previews up for the potential second-round games for SEC teams. So Tennessee fans will probably do something on Virginia Wright State just to kind of get you ready for the second round if you advance. One game at a time, though, guys. Keep that in mind. But, yes, check out all of our stuff over at Southeastern 16. Of course, we'll be reacting live after pretty much every game that an SEC team plays in the NCAA tournament. So, yeah, find us there, Southeastern 16 on YouTube.
All right. Again, can't thank you enough for the time, man. It's good catching up. I'm sure we'll do it again somewhere down the road, maybe soon who knows, maybe SEC's got another, 7 out of the Sweet 16, then we've got some stuff to talk about, but we shall find out, and we're looking forward to it. Blake, thank you, man. Hope you have a great rest of the week.
Always enjoy it, guys. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, between him and Max, I've never really talked with Max Barr, but Max always drops some really nice info nuggets as well. If you follow him on social media, he's got some good stuff as well. They do a great job.
Yeah, they do. It's consistent 365, and they've been a good, as basketball guys in the SEC, it's sometimes a little slow getting started, but they're year round. They'll be, once we get through the tournament and we're rolling into the off season and the portal stuff, they'll be having great SEC basketball content, keeping up with all that and how all the additions and departures affect each team. So they're a great source. They're a great source to go to for all your SEC basketball fixes.
Yeah, no doubt. One thing I was going to, speaking of little factoids, one thing, just if we can rewind for a second, we're talking about things that as Tennessee gets ready to enter the NCAA tournament, and it is interesting. I mean, there's a lot of perspective on the outside of, this team's uneven, but there's certain things they do so well, namely the rebounding aspect of it, that you can't look past them. That said, there's one thing that has frustrated the hell out of us all season, Ryan, and I know you broke it down for a piece you did for Rocky Top Insider, and we saw it again in the last Vanderbilt game in the SEC tournament, and that is what I believe could be the undoing to this team, could be what happens at the free throw line, because what I've seen this year, I've never seen anything like it with a Tennessee team.
Yeah, so the story is actually not out yet, but probably will be by the time you're listening to this. It'll be this afternoon. It'll be this afternoon, and it's something that I've liked to do the last couple years. And Usually I spend the Tennessee bye week doing it, but the bye week was so early this year that we didn't have a large enough sample size. And it's just finding the stats that most indicate success or failure for Tennessee in the free throw lines. Shooting 70%, which 70% is really not even that good. 70% is a below average free throw rate for a college basketball team.
Right.
When Tennessee shoots 70% or better, they are 14-1 in games this season. The only loss being the one to Kansas. And then obviously when they don't, they are 8-10. So that was probably the most glaring, the most jarring. The other one being, again, a very simple one. When Nate Ament scores 20-plus points, Tennessee is 8-2. When he doesn't, they are 12-8. So, including 7-1 in SEC play when he scored 20, or against SEC teams when he scored 20 points. So, there's a couple interesting ones, but those two were the most dramatic, and certainly the free throws really matches up.
Yeah, it's so hard to watch. Between that and then we didn't even get into the rim shot thing, but anybody who follows the team closely knows that's been a huge bone of contention too. I mean, against Vandy, it was like almost half of their rebounds were on the offensive glass, but they only converted on, as far as second chance points at least, they only converted about half of that, it felt like. And that's, again, not a good percentage at all.
No, and it's an ongoing issue. It's, the same. I said it to Ben McKee after the Vanderbilt game that, it makes me feel for these people to like cover NBA teams that aren't good, where it's just like, what?
Yeah.
It's Tennessee's lost 11 games. It's not even like it's that crazy, but it's just, you sit here and talk about basically the same 2 or 3 things after every loss. And certainly that is one of them.
No doubt. All right, let's look ahead a little bit. Beyond just the SEC, the whole NCAA tournament in general. I'm going to pull something out of the archive, and when I say that was only a week ago, but we did a stock report last week, Ryan and I did, on which teams and their stock was rising or falling as we closed in on the NCAA tournament. And I know it's only a week, it's still early, but Ryan, we look like true ball knowers because I'm pulling the sheet right now, and you might be able to add to this, but some of the teams we had as stock rising was St. John's, who looked like a wagon against UConn in the Big East Championship. Houston, now they lost their championship game, but I do like Houston still. Arkansas showed us a lot, I think, in the SEC tournament. Wisconsin, another one. As far as risers or fallers, we did have Purdue, and I think Purdue may have figured something out this past week. Texas Tech, they're a 5 seed. North Carolina, I still stand by as a faller. And then Kansas, Kansas looks like they're limping coming into the tournament. So I don't know. Again, it feels like, and I can't recall, I think you added a team or two to that list too.
Yeah, I know one of my risers was UCLA.
Good one.
I mean, that's probably fresh on the mind just because they did so well. And I know I had Clemson on a trending down, and they did okay. They made a solid run. They beat the teams that they should have beaten before losing to Duke. So I do know those were kind of the 2 I had. I know I threw a couple names out there, names out there as well, but I can't remember exactly who all. Ohio State was actually one I know I had as a riser too in the Big Ten, and obviously they had a good week there too. So and really solidified themselves.
Yeah, and we had also as a faller, we had UConn, and I still stand by that one too. So as a matter of fact, as I said earlier to Blake, in at least my first bracket I've got UCLA taking them out in the second round. You're going to have to take notes when you go to that one if you're there in person.
Yeah.
If it happens, that's going to be a wonderful matchup. All right, so looking deeper into the brackets, and after another week of intense action on the court, so we've learned a little more, we think. We're going to take a minute as we wrap up the show and make our predictions so we get it on tape on the teams that Ryan and I feel are going to make the Final Four in Indianapolis. And what's crazy is that's less than, I think it'd be 3 weeks from today they'll be playing for the national title. It's crazy. It's going to be warp speed now. So Ryan, I'll let you start. Who are you picturing at this point as your Final Four?
Yeah, I have my Final Four, and it's pretty chalk, but I got Arizona, in the West, Michigan in the Midwest, Illinois in the South. Blake, he's not sold on him. I can't quit him. And then I rolled with Duke. Duke in the East. St. John's and Kansas both, I think, could give him a scare. But you said it. I'm not super high on UConn. I'm not very high on Michigan State. So those are the four that I had the most confidence in. And another thing I would disagree with Blake. I agree with him from an Arizona Elite Eight standpoint. Matchup is pretty good, but I think both Wisconsin and Arkansas can give them a good game. I do worry about that in the Sweet 16, but still, Arizona's the team I had the most trust in. I got Arizona over Duke in the title.
Okay, those are good. For me, I think what I saw this weekend probably clouded my judgment, but I'm going to pivot a little bit, because if we were going into the weekend, I would have probably gone all chalk, honestly. As a matter of fact, I think I was saying I could see Florida win it at all when we were talking last week, but I feel a little different about that now. So I like Blake. I can imagine, just because I know they're young too, but Kelvin Sampson, some of those remaining guys on Houston, they've been there before. I've got Houston going to the Final Four out of the South. Not to mention that they're going to be playing that regional final in Houston, which works well for them. I've got Duke still coming out of the East. I felt like that Virginia game was a really interesting test. I know they struggled and almost went down to Florida State, but they're playing without Caleb Foster. They're playing without Pat Gongba. I still think they got enough. I wonder, I think the St. John's game could be fascinating with Duke, but I still think Duke gets there. On the other side of the bracket, out of the West, this is the one where, again, my judgment may be clouded, but I think, and I was down on them last week, I think Purdue's found something. I think if Oscar Clough can do what he did in the Big Ten tournament, and continue that, these guys have the personnel. And Matt Painter said it yesterday. The big difference is they may have figured out how to play a little bit of defense, because that's what's been killing them. They haven't been able to guard anybody. I think they beat Arizona. I think they make it to the Final Four. And then I got Michigan coming out of the Midwest. I've got Michigan and Duke in the finals.
Rematch.
A rematch. And I think Michigan wins this time. I got Michigan winning it all.
Yeah, I mean, that's, to me, I would have one of those three of Arizona, Michigan, and Duke. I do think Purdue is going to be the classic example of the team that plays well in the Big Ten or in the conference tournament, and everybody falls back in love with them, and it proves to be, just a blip. So I'm not quite buying Purdue at that level yet. I do like their first round matchups. Like I have a hard time seeing Miami or Missouri, even in St. Louis, giving them that much problems, or giving them too many problems. But I'm hesitant to buy back in. I'm just other quick bracket thoughts, and I know I hit on this. I'm upset about Wisconsin and Arkansas. I like both those teams a lot, and they're playing each other in 4-5, and then they got my favorite one that they're playing in the Sweet 16. And then one, and it's not really a big upset. It's a 6-11 game. But I really like South Florida over Louisville. I think that's a really good matchup for Louisville.
I agree. I think that's a good call. I like that one a lot. I'm trying to think of any other one as I scroll through here really quickly. And I've been with you. I've liked Illinois a lot this season, but I do tend to agree with what Blake said, that they're kind of a higher octane version of Tennessee sometimes. You know what I mean? They kind of look fantastic and then they vanish for a minute. And I just feel like when they get to that matchup against Houston, I just think Houston's going to grind them. I fully believe it.
Here's a crazy Illinois stat. They've lost 8 games this year, 4 of them in overtime.
Yeah, no.
They're not good in overtime.
They're not good at finishing, right? I'm just looking through to see if there was any other game that caught my eye. I think those were the one. What do you think about VCU, North Carolina, in the first round?
Yeah, I kind of like VCU with how
too.
well they're playing, and Caleb Wilson. I'm not ready to call upsets on these games, but I'm intrigued to look more into Akron over Texas Tech and look in more on Troy and Nebraska. And Blake said as much. And Like, I know all the Vanderbilt people are saying they got screwed with the 5 seed, and look, I don't think they should have been a 5 seed, but I would sign up for the draw that they got if I was Vanderbilt. I mean, I don't think Nebraska's very good. I think I'm looking at the 4 or 5s now, so the combined 4 and 5s. Texas Tech is the only 4 or 5 seed that I think is worse than Nebraska, and that's purely because of injury. So I think that's a great draw. You get to meet a worse 1 seed in Florida. I know it'll be a more difficult first-round matchup for them because they're a 5, but I don't know. I'm hesitant to really listen to the complaints of the Vanderbilt fans because even as a 5 seed, I think they got a fantastic draw.
Yeah, I agree. Man, I can't wait. It's coming quick. It's coming quick. Well, listen, man, I think that does it for this week. We didn't talk about the Lady Vols. We know they're playing on Friday in the first round against a rematch from earlier in the regular season against North Carolina State. And I think that, I don't know, we'll see. I mean, they win. They play, I think, is Michigan the 2 seed? That's who they face if they happen to win their first round game.
Yes.
That's what I saw in Ann Arbor. So that's going to be tough road. The only thing I'll say is when I saw the selection stuff last night, and I saw Talasia Cooper right there in the middle of it on video, looking like she was part of the team. So they've been very quiet. We'll see what happens later in the week. But anyway, we'll be back next week to recap the action for the Vols and the Lady Vols in that first and hopefully second round of the NCAA tournament. Along with, there'll be inevitably some conversations on what surprised us in the first weekend of March Madness, as you can always count on some level of chaos. It's always going to happen. It's why it's such a wonderful event. So we'll be able to cover that as well. We appreciate you checking us out as always. As a reminder, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button for the show. If you're watching us on YouTube at the Rocky Top Insider YouTube channel, or download our podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. And also, in the meantime, keep it locked in on Rocky Top Insider at RockyTopInsider.com on all the socials for the very best in Tennessee athletics coverage. Ryan, Rick Butler, Ryan Sylvia, Jack Foster, they're all out there covering it, whether it's basketball, baseball, softball. These guys do a wonderful job. Ryan, as always, appreciate you and appreciate the chance to talk ball with you. And I hope you have a great trip to Philly, and hoping we can talk about the Vols playing in the Sweet 16 when we gather up the next time.
Yeah, it sounds great.
Yeah, definitely so. And I appreciate Blake Lovell with Southeastern 16 for joining us as well. And to all of you out there, thank you very much for giving us some of your time. Hope you have a great tournament week ahead. Get those brackets filled out, and we'll see you next time with another episode of the RTI Rim Runner.